I have back problems. Sitting for long periods is painful. When a prestigious mathematics professor discovered her maid's son solving complex equations on her whiteboard, she immediately assumed it was impossible. How could a cleaner's son from a substandard high school understand doctoral-level mathematics? But when she challenged him to solve an unsolvable problem in front of her elite students, what happened next shocked everyone in the room. Why was this brilliant young man standing instead of sitting? What dark secret about our education system would soon be revealed? And how could one moment of academic arrogance transform into an unexpected journey of redemption? Find out in this powerful story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about talent, opportunity, and second chances. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marlene Johnson's hands were cracked and dry from years of scrubbing other people's floors. Today, she polished the gleaming hardwood in Dr. Elizabeth Harrington's sprawling Victorian home, careful not to disturb the stacks of academic journals and mathematical textbooks scattered throughout. Marlene, before you leave, please organize my office. The University Journal is coming to photograph it tomorrow, Dr. Harrington called out as she swept through the hallway, designer heels clicking against the floor Marlene had just cleaned. Yes, ma'am, Marlene replied, keeping her eyes down. Dr. Harrington paused, adjusting her pearl necklace. And please don't touch any of the equations on the whiteboard. They're for my research paper on nonlinear differential equations. Not that you'd understand, it's quite complex. As the front door closed behind the professor, Marlene sighed. After cleaning for Dr. Harrington for 3 years, she was accustomed to the woman's condescending tone. The mathematician saw her as nothing more than hands that cleaned, never as a woman who had dreams of her own, or as a mother fighting to give her son opportunities she never had. Speaking of her son, Marlene checked her watch. Jamal would be arriving soon. At 17, he was too old for a babysitter, but with school being such a struggle lately, she preferred having him where she could see him. The doorbell rang 30 minutes later. Jamal stood on the porch, his tall frame slightly hunched, a habit he'd developed to minimize his back pain. How was your day? Marlene asked, noticing the tightness around his eyes that indicated his discomfort was worse today. The same, he mumbled, setting his backpack down gently. Had to stand through most of it. Marlene's heart ached. 6 months had passed since the incident with Ms. Peterson, but the physical and emotional scars remained. Did you take your medication? Jamal nodded, his eyes already drifting toward Dr. Harrington's home office. Is she home? No, she's at the university until evening. A small spark lit in Jamal's eyes, the first Marlene had seen all day. Can I look at her books while you finish? Just don't disturb anything, Marlene cautioned, knowing her son's fascination with mathematics was the one thing that still brought him joy. What Marlene didn't know was that her brilliant son wasn't just looking at books, he was about to change both their lives forever. The pain started low in Jamal's back and radiated outward, a constant reminder of that horrible day 6 months ago. As he carefully lowered himself onto the floor of Dr. Harrington's office, the only position that offered some relief, he winced, the memory as sharp as the initial blow had been. Ms. Peterson had been explaining a calculus problem to the class, confidently writing an equation on the board. Jamal had noticed her mistake immediately. The derivative was wrong, it would lead the entire class to incorrect solutions. Excuse me, Ms. Peterson, he had said politely, raising his hand. I think there's an error in the equation. The classroom had fallen silent. No one questioned Ms. Peterson, especially not Jamal Johnson, the quiet scholarship student from the wrong side of town. And what would you know about advanced calculus, Mr. Johnson? She had sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. The second term should be negative, not positive, Jamal had explained, keeping his voice steady despite the snickers from his classmates. Otherwise, the limit doesn't converge properly. Ms. Peterson's face had darkened with rage and embarrassment. Stand up, she had commanded. What happened next still gave Jamal nightmares. She had ordered him to turn around, facing away from the class, and before he realized what was happening, she had struck him hard across his lower back with a wooden ruler, a vicious, calculated blow delivered with surprising strength. "Perhaps this will teach you not to disrupt my class with your showing off," she had hissed. The physical pain had been excruciating, but the humiliation was worse. No one had spoken up for him. No one had reported it. And when Marlene tried to file a complaint, the school administration had dismissed it as exaggerated. The injury had caused unexpected complications. What should have been bruising developed into persistent inflammation around his lower spine. Without proper health insurance, the minimal medical care they could afford only provided pain medication, not treatment. Now, surrounded by Dr. Harrington's mathematical textbooks, Jamal found temporary escape from his physical discomfort. Mathematics had always been his sanctuary, numbers followed rules, equations had solutions, problems could be solved with persistence. Unlike people, who were unpredictable and often cruel. He opened his worn notebook, filled with his own mathematical explorations. Before the incident, he'd dreamed of a scholarship to study mathematics at a university. Now, he could barely sit through a full class period without excruciating pain. Glancing up, Jamal noticed Dr. Harrington's whiteboard covered with complex equations. Despite everything, his mind immediately began analyzing them, spotting patterns and possibilities. The equations related to a famous unsolved problem in differential calculus, one he'd read about in library books. Without thinking, he slowly stood, picked up a marker, and began working through the problem in his own way, lost in the beauty of mathematics where his pain, both physical and emotional, temporarily faded away. Maybe this approach. He muttered to himself, unaware that he was solving a problem that had stumped Dr. Harrington for months. Dr. Elizabeth Harrington prided herself on precision. Her schedule, like her equations, followed strict parameters. Today, however, a cancelled faculty meeting disrupted her routine, bringing her home 3 hours earlier than planned. She entered her house, noticing the fresh lemony scent of cleaned surfaces. Good, at least Marlene had finished the downstairs. Removing her designer coat, she headed straight to her office to review notes for tomorrow's lecture. The sight that greeted her stopped her cold. Her whiteboard, her sacred space of mathematical exploration, was altered. The equations she'd been struggling with for weeks now continued across the board with unfamiliar handwriting, developing in directions she hadn't considered. "Marlene," she called sharply, anger rising. "Marlene." The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, Dr. Harrington. I thought you'd be home at," her eyes widened seeing the whiteboard. "Who has been in my office?" Dr. Harrington demanded, her voice tight with controlled fury. "These are confidential research equations. Who did you let in here?" Marlene's face paled. Only my son, but he wouldn't." "Your son?" Dr. Harrington cut her off incredulously. "You bring your son to my home while working? And he vandalized my research?" Before Marlene could respond, a tall young man appeared behind her. Despite his height, something in his posture suggested vulnerability. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I just saw the problem and thought I could help." Dr. Harrington laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Help? With nonlinear differential equations? This is doctoral-level mathematics." "I know," Jamal replied, his voice gaining slight confidence. "You were approaching it using standard methods, but I thought a transform-based solution might work better for this particular case." Dr. Harrington stared at him, speechless for a moment. Then her academic training kicked in. No untrained teenager could possibly understand, let alone contribute to, her research. This had to be some kind of prank or, worse, academic theft. "Where did you copy this from?" she demanded, gesturing to the board. "I didn't copy it," Jamal said. "I worked it out myself." Marlene stepped forward protectively. "My son is gifted with mathematics, Dr. Harrington. He always has been." Dr. Harrington scrutinized the equations more carefully. The approach was unorthodox but, potentially viable. Impossible. A housekeeper's son couldn't have developed this level of mathematical insight without formal training. "Where do you study?" she asked Jamal sharply. "Winston High School," he answered. "But I spend a lot of time at the public library. They have some good mathematics books." Dr. Harrington's eyebrows shot up. Winston High was known for many things, but academic excellence wasn't one of them. "Why are you standing like that?" she asked suddenly, noticing his awkward posture. A flash of discomfort crossed Jamal's face. "I have back problems. It hurts to sit for too long." Dr. Harrington's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Everything about this situation felt wrong. A cleaning lady's son from a subpar high school solving complex mathematical problems that challenged experienced mathematicians. Standing instead of sitting due to mysterious back problems. "Erase the board," she instructed coldly. "And Marlene, in the future, please come alone to work. Your son's creativity is not welcome near my research." As Jamal reluctantly began erasing his work, Dr. Harrington couldn't help but notice the elegant efficiency of his solution path. A coincidence, surely. Or perhaps he'd somehow gained access to research papers online. Either way, she needed to get to the bottom of this bizarre situation. Dr. Harrington watched with narrowed eyes as Jamal erased his work from her whiteboard. Something didn't add up, and inconsistencies bothered her as much in people as they did in equations. "Wait," she commanded suddenly. "Before you erase everything, explain your approach." It was a test. If he'd simply copied the work from somewhere, he wouldn't be able to articulate the reasoning behind it. Jamal paused, marker still in hand. "I noticed you were using a conventional approach to the boundary conditions, but the system is actually chaotic at those points." His voice grew steadier as he explained the mathematics. "So I applied a modified Fourier transform to convert the problem space, which makes the solution more elegant." Dr. Harrington's academic skepticism battled with growing surprise. His explanation was clear, precise, and theoretically sound. But her pride wouldn't let her acknowledge it. "That's basic textbook material," she dismissed, though they both knew it wasn't. "Let me see if you actually understand the foundations." She grabbed a marker and quickly wrote a new equation on the board, a complex integration problem she gave to her graduate students. "Solve this," she challenged, certain he would fail. Jamal studied it for a moment, still standing awkwardly due to his back pain. Without sitting down, he began writing, his hand moving confidently across the board. Marlene watched nervously from the doorway. "Dr. Harrington, Jamal really is gifted. His teachers have said so since elementary school. Being good at arithmetic isn't the same as understanding advanced calculus," Dr. Harrington replied coolly, watching Jamal work. "And if he's so gifted, why haven't I heard of him? Why isn't he at Westfield Academy or another proper preparatory school?" Marlene's expression tightened. "We don't have that kind of money, Dr. Harrington." Jamal stepped back from the board. "I think that's the solution," he said quietly. Dr. Harrington examined his work, looking for mistakes, for proof that this was all an elaborate deception. But the solution was correct, and he'd used an approach she hadn't considered. Still, her suspicion outweighed her academic curiosity. "You must have seen this problem before. Perhaps online or in a textbook." "No, ma'am," Jamal replied. "Then explain to me why a mathematical prodigy is attending a substandard high school, standing oddly in my office, and has a mother who cleans houses." The words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. Marlene stepped forward, her dignity intact despite the insult. "Dr. Harrington, not everyone has the privileges you've enjoyed. Jamal's talents are real, regardless of our circumstances." "I think it's time for you both to leave," Dr. Harrington said coldly. "And Marlene, perhaps it's best if you don't return. I'll find another housekeeper, one who respects boundaries." Jamal's face flushed with shame and anger. "My mom didn't do anything wrong. This was my fault." "Exactly," Dr. Harrington agreed. "And now her lack of supervision has cost her this job." As Marlene gathered her cleaning supplies, her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "You're making a mistake, Dr. Harrington. Not about the job, but about my son." The bus ride home was silent. Marlene stared out the window, mentally calculating how losing Dr. Harrington's weekly payment would affect their already tight budget. Beside her, Jamal's shoulders slumped with guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said finally. "I never meant to cost you your job." Marlene turned to her son, determination replacing her earlier distress. "You have nothing to apologize for. That woman may be brilliant in mathematics, but she knows nothing about human decency. But how will we make rent this month?" "We'll manage. We always do." Marlene squeezed his hand, then straightened up suddenly. "No, this isn't right. She can't just dismiss your ability like that." The next morning, Marlene did something unprecedented. She returned to Dr. Harrington's home, Jamal reluctantly in tow. When Dr. Harrington answered the door in her robe, coffee cup in hand, her surprise quickly turned to annoyance. "I believe I made myself clear yesterday, Marlene. 5 minutes of your time, Dr. Harrington. That's all I ask." Something in Marlene's tone, dignity mixed with determination, made the professor step aside. In the living room, Marlene spoke directly. "You're wrong about my son. If you're truly committed to mathematics as you claim, you owe it to your field to recognize talent, regardless of where it comes from." Dr. Harrington laughed. "Are you lecturing me about my field? I have 2 PhDs and a tenure position." "Then you have nothing to fear from a proper test of Jamal's abilities," Marlene challenged. "If he fails, we'll never bother you again. If he succeeds, you acknowledge his talent." Dr. Harrington considered this unexpected proposition. Her academic curiosity was piqued despite herself, and the opportunity to definitively prove this cleaner's son a fraud was tempting. "Fine," she said finally. "He can attend my advanced calculus lecture this afternoon. I'll present him with a problem. If, by some miracle, he solves it correctly, I'll reconsider my position." "And my job?" Marlene pressed. "One step at a time," Dr. Harrington replied coldly. After they left, Dr. Harrington called Dean Richards. "William, I have an unusual situation developing. I need you to witness something in my lecture today." Meanwhile, on another bus ride, Jamal turned to his mother. "Why did you do that? You know how these people see us." Marlene's expression was resolute. "Because you deserve recognition. Because the Dr. Harringtons of the world don't get to decide what you're capable of based on where we live or what I do for a living." Jamal looked down at his worn sneakers. "What if I can't solve her problem? What if my back starts hurting and I can't concentrate?" "Then you'll have tried," Marlene said simply. "And that's all anyone can ask of you." Elite University's mathematics building intimidated Jamal from the moment he entered. Marble floors, mahogany paneling, and framed photographs of stern-looking mathematicians lined the hallways. Even the air felt different, rarefied, as though reserved for those born to breathe it. Dr. Harrington's lecture hall was at the end of the main corridor. As Jamal and Marlene approached, Dean Richards greeted them with practiced politeness that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand there's been some disagreement about your son's mathematical abilities," he said, his gaze evaluating Jamal's worn jeans and simple button-down shirt. "Dr. Harrington has explained the situation. I'm here to ensure everything proceeds fairly." Inside the lecture hall, 30 graduate students turned to stare as they entered. Dr. Harrington stood at the podium, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her laser pointer in hand like a conductor's baton. "Ah, our special guests have arrived," she announced, her tone making it clear they were more spectacle than guests. "Class, we have a young man who believes he has a natural gift for advanced mathematics. Today, we'll put that to the test." Jamal felt every eye in the room on him. His back throbbed dully, a reminder of why regular classrooms had become such torture. Standing for long periods hurt, but sitting was worse. "Please, take a seat," Dr. Harrington gestured to an empty chair in the front row. If it's all right, I'd prefer to stand, Jamal said quietly. Whispers rippled through the classroom. Dr. Harrington's eyebrow arched. As you wish. Though standing through advanced calculus seems an odd choice. She turned to the whiteboard and began writing a complex equation involving multiple integrals and differential operators. This problem has been challenging my graduate students for the past 3 weeks, she explained. No one has yet found a complete solution. Marlene, sitting nervously in the back row, watched her son's face. Despite the pressure, she saw his expression change as he looked at the equation, the same quiet focus that had appeared when he was just 7, solving puzzles meant for adults. You may begin, Dr. Harrington said with barely concealed smugness. Though feel free to give up whenever it becomes too difficult. Jamal approached the board, aware of the snickers from some students. One whispered audibly, "Is he the janitor's kid or something?" For a moment, his confidence wavered. Then he thought of his mother, who cleaned other people's homes with dignity despite how they treated her. He thought of the countless hours in the library, mathematics books propped open as he taught himself concepts his school never offered. He picked up a marker and began to write. The room fell silent as his hand moved across the board, transforming the forbidding equation through a series of elegant steps. He worked methodically, occasionally pausing to consider his next move, but never erasing or backtracking. After 15 minutes, Dr. Harrington's smug expression had faded. After 30, it was replaced by disbelief. The graduate students had stopped whispering and were watching intently, some taking hurried notes. Jamal's back was screaming in pain now, but he refused to show it. Each time a spasm hit, he would pause briefly, take a deep breath, and continue. The mathematics flowed through him, offering the only relief available. This term can be simplified further, he said quietly, almost to himself. And if we apply this transformation to the boundary condition? Dean Richards leaned toward Dr. Harrington. Elizabeth, is he actually solving it? Dr. Harrington didn't answer immediately, her eyes fixed on Jamal's work. It appears so, she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. After 45 minutes, Jamal placed the marker down and stepped back from the board, wincing slightly as he straightened his posture. I think that's the solution, he said. Though there might be a more elegant approach I'm not seeing. The lecture hall remained silent, every eye moving between the filled whiteboard and the young man who had just done what many of them couldn't. The silence in the lecture hall was broken by a single slow clap. All heads turned to see a silver-haired black man in a tweed jacket standing in the doorway. Brilliant, said Professor James Carter, his voice carrying across the room. Absolutely brilliant. Dr. Harrington's face tightened. James, this is a private demonstration. Dean Richards mentioned something interesting was happening in your lecture, Professor Carter replied, walking toward the whiteboard. He wasn't exaggerating. As the university's most respected mathematician and the only black tenured professor in the department, James Carter's presence changed the dynamic in the room immediately. He studied Jamal's solution, nodding appreciatively. Young man, you've used a technique that combines elements of complex analysis with differential topology. It's unorthodox but elegant. Where did you learn this approach? Jamal shifted his weight, trying to find a position that eased his back pain. I didn't really learn it anywhere, sir. It just seemed logical based on the structure of the problem. Professor Carter's eyebrows rose. You developed this approach independently? I read a lot of mathematics books, Jamal explained. Sometimes different methods from different areas can be combined. Dr. Harrington interrupted, her voice sharp. This proves nothing. He could have memorized the solution beforehand. Elizabeth, Professor Carter said gently, this problem is from your current research. It isn't published anywhere to memorize. Then he must have had access to my notes, she insisted. When he was in my home office. Jamal shook his head. I saw the problem for the first time today. One of the graduate students spoke up. Professor Harrington, this approach is different from anything in your notes. We've been working from those materials for weeks. Dr. Harrington's face flushed. She turned to Jamal, her voice tight. If you're so comfortable with mathematics, why are you standing awkwardly instead of sitting like everyone else? It's distracting and unprofessional. The question hung in the air. Marlene started to stand from her seat, protectiveness flashing in her eyes, but Jamal spoke first. I have a back injury, he said simply. Sitting for long periods is painful. A convenient excuse, Dr. Harrington muttered. Professor Carter studied Jamal with concern. An injury from sports? Jamal hesitated, then answered quietly. No, sir. A former teacher struck me with a ruler when I corrected her mathematics in class. It caused nerve damage that never properly healed. Gasps echoed through the lecture hall. Even Dr. Harrington looked momentarily stunned. A teacher did this to you? Professor Carter asked, his voice carefully controlled. Ms. Peterson, my sophomore-year math teacher, Jamal confirmed. She said I was being disruptive by pointing out her mistake. Dean Richards stepped forward. This is a serious allegation, young man. It's not an allegation, Marlene said, standing up. It's what happened. We filed a complaint, but nothing was done. We couldn't afford proper medical care, and now my son lives with chronic pain because a teacher couldn't bear being corrected by a black student. The silence that followed was heavy with uncomfortable truth. Dean Richards cleared his throat awkwardly. Let's focus on the mathematics for now. The educational misconduct allegation can be addressed separately. With all due respect, Professor Carter interjected, they can't be separated. If what this young man says is true, we're looking at a case where mathematical brilliance was punished instead of nurtured, and physically punished, at that. Dr. Harrington stood rigid, her worldview visibly shaken. This is becoming absurd. A cleaning woman's son appears in my lecture hall, solves a complex problem, makes allegations against another teacher, and suddenly my entire class is derailed. My mother cleans houses because it's honest work that puts food on our table, Jamal said quietly but firmly. It doesn't determine my ability to understand mathematics. Professor Carter placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. Son, would you mind writing down how you approached this problem from the beginning? Your thought process interests me greatly. As Jamal began explaining his methodology, Professor Carter turned to Dean Richards and Dr. Harrington, speaking in a low voice. This young man has an exceptional mind. Instead of questioning how he acquired it, we should be asking ourselves how many others like him we've missed because of our preconceptions about who can excel in mathematics. Dr. Harrington bristled. Are you suggesting I'm prejudiced, James? I've simply been maintaining academic standards. I'm suggesting, Professor Carter replied evenly, that brilliance doesn't check bank accounts or street addresses before taking root. And that sometimes, our standards are just barriers we've never questioned. One of the graduate students, a young woman with glasses, approached cautiously. Professor Harrington, I've been stuck on this exact problem for weeks. His solution works. I've checked 3 different ways. Dr. Harrington looked from the student to Jamal, who was now explaining a subtle point about convergence to several fascinated graduate students. Her certainty wavered visibly. Marlene stepped forward. Dr. Harrington, my son has been teaching himself advanced mathematics since he was 12. Every night, after finishing his homework, he reads university-level textbooks he gets from the library. He does this standing up at our kitchen counter because sitting at a desk hurts too much. Why didn't you pursue proper medical treatment? Dean Richards asked. We tried, Marlene replied. But without good insurance, specialists wouldn't see him. The school denied the incident occurred. Ms. Peterson claimed Jamal was lying about being hit, and the administration believed her. Professor Carter's expression darkened. And where is this Ms. Peterson now? Still teaching at Winston High, Marlene answered. She was recently made head of the mathematics department. This is outrageous, Professor Carter said. Elizabeth, surely you see what's happening here. A young mathematical talent has been suppressed through physical abuse, institutional neglect, and now academic gatekeeping. Dr. Harrington's composure finally cracked. What do you expect me to do, James? Overturn the entire educational system because one housekeeper's son can solve an equation? No, Professor Carter replied. I expect you to acknowledge talent when you see it, regardless of its source. And perhaps consider that your housekeeper deserves the same respect you'd give anyone else, especially since she's raised a son with extraordinary abilities despite every obstacle our society placed in their way. The classroom fell silent as Dr. Harrington looked from Professor Carter to Jamal to Marlene, the comfortable certainties of her world visibly crumbling. The following Saturday, Professor Carter's vintage Volvo pulled up outside Marlene and Jamal's apartment building. The complex was well maintained but modest, a far cry from the affluent neighborhood surrounding Elite University. Thank you for agreeing to meet on a weekend, Professor Carter said as Marlene welcomed him inside. It's no trouble, she replied. Jamal's been talking about your conversation ever since the lecture. Their apartment was small but immaculate. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with worn library books and second-hand textbooks. A folding table by the window served as Jamal's study area, with a standing desk improvised from stacked milk crates. Jamal entered from his bedroom, moving carefully to minimize his discomfort. Professor Carter, I didn't expect you to actually come. I said I wanted to see your work, and I meant it, the older mathematician replied. But first, I'd like to understand more about what happened with Ms. Peterson, if you're comfortable sharing. Marlene gestured for them to sit at the small dining table while she remained standing. It happened during Jamal's sophomore year, she began. He's always been advanced in mathematics, testing at college level since middle school. But last year, things changed. Jamal stared at his hands. Ms. Peterson didn't like being corrected. The first few times I pointed out mistakes in her work, she just ignored me. Then she started sending me to the principal's office for disruption. But that day was different. The ruler incident, Professor Carter prompted gently. Jamal nodded. She made a fundamental error in a calculus demonstration. When I raised my hand to point it out, she became furious. She made me turn around in front of everyone and struck me across my lower back with a wooden ruler, the old-fashioned kind with a metal edge. Professor Carter winced. And the school did nothing? They said it was his word against hers, Marlene explained. There were student witnesses, but none would speak up. Ms. Peterson is from an influential family in our district. The pain got worse over the next few weeks, Jamal continued. The school nurse just gave me ibuprofen. When Mom took me to the emergency room, they said I needed to see a specialist for the nerve damage, but our insurance wouldn't cover it. So you've been in pain this entire time? Professor Carter asked, disbelief in his voice. It comes and goes, Jamal said. Sitting is the worst. Standing hurts after a while too, but it's manageable. Marlene's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. I've worked 2 jobs trying to save enough for proper treatment. Meanwhile, the woman who did this was promoted. Professor Carter shook his head slowly. And despite all this, you've continued studying mathematics at this level? In answer, Jamal went to his room and returned with several notebooks. These are my projects. Professor Carter opened the first notebook and began reading, his expression shifting from interest to astonishment. Page after page contained original mathematical explorations, some approaching known problems from unique angles, others developing entirely new questions. Jamal, this work on geometric series. He pointed to a particular derivation. This is beyond undergraduate level. And this approach to topology, have you read Thurston's work? Parts of it, Jamal admitted. The library doesn't have all his papers, but I found some online. Professor Carter looked up, his decision made. Marlene, Jamal, what happened to you is unconscionable. But I believe we can change things, starting now. How? Marlene asked skeptically. We've tried before. Because this time, Professor Carter said firmly, you have witnesses, evidence, and someone from Elite University in your corner. And Elizabeth Harrington is about to face her own reckoning. Dean Richards' office felt overcrowded with tension. Dr. Harrington sat rigidly in one chair, while Professor Carter occupied another. On the dean's mahogany desk lay Jamal's notebooks, open to pages of original mathematical research. "I've reviewed everything," Dean Richards said, removing his glasses. "James, are you certain about the quality of this work?" "Absolutely," Professor Carter confirmed. "Some of these insights could form the basis for publication in peer-reviewed journals. The boy has extraordinary talent." Dr. Harrington stared at the notebooks. Since the classroom confrontation, she'd been uncharacteristically quiet, her certainties shaken. "And regarding the allegation against this Miss Peterson?" Dean Richards continued. "I've spoken with former students who witnessed the incident," Professor Carter replied. "None were willing to come forward previously, fearing academic retribution. Now, 3 have provided written statements confirming Marlene and Jamal's account." "This is deeply troubling," Dean Richards said. "A talented young mathematician physically assaulted for correcting an error, then systematically denied opportunities." Dr. Harrington finally spoke. "If what they're saying is true..." "It is true," Professor Carter interrupted. "I've seen the medical reports. The boy has nerve damage consistent with the type of injury described." "Then it's appalling," Dr. Harrington admitted. "But what does this have to do with me?" Professor Carter leaned forward. "Elizabeth, when Jamal solved your equation, your first instinct wasn't amazement or curiosity, it was disbelief and dismissal. You couldn't accept that a housekeeper's son might possess mathematical brilliance." "That's not fair," she protested. "I questioned his abilities because his background lacked formal training, not because of his race or his mother's occupation." "Did you?" Professor Carter challenged. "When was the last time you questioned the abilities of a student from Westfield Academy or Exeter? When did you last ask one of them how they could possibly understand complex mathematics?" Dr. Harrington fell silent. Dean Richards cleared his throat. "We need to address both issues. First, the Ms. Peterson situation. I've contacted Winston High's superintendent. With the new witness statements and medical evidence, they're reopening the investigation." "It's too late," Dr. Harrington said quietly. "The damage is done." "It's never too late to seek justice," Professor Carter replied. "But you're right that the damage can't be undone entirely. Which brings us to the second issue, what we do now." Dean Richards nodded. "I've consulted with the university's legal department and the board of trustees. We're prepared to offer Jamal a full scholarship to our early admission program, plus medical treatment through the university's health system." Dr. Harrington looked up sharply. "Without entrance exams? Without the standard application process?" "His work speaks for itself," Professor Carter said, gesturing to the notebooks. "And he's already solved research problems that challenge our graduate students." "And what about Marlene?" Professor Carter continued. "Will she remain just the cleaning lady whose son we've plucked for our academic glory?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and pointed. Dr. Harrington stood abruptly. "I need to think. This is all happening very quickly." As she reached the door, Professor Carter spoke again. "Elizabeth, you have an opportunity here. Not just to right a wrong, but to examine the biases that made this situation possible in the first place, including your own." After she left, Dean Richards sighed heavily. "James, do you think she'll come around?" "I hope so," Professor Carter replied. "Because this isn't just about Jamal and Marlene anymore. It's about all the brilliant minds we've overlooked because they didn't fit our preconceptions of what a mathematician should look like or where they should come from." Outside, Dr. Harrington leaned against the corridor wall, her carefully constructed worldview crumbling around her. 3 days passed before Dr. Harrington made her decision. She arrived at Marlene and Jamal's apartment unannounced, looking strangely out of place in her designer clothes. When Marlene opened the door, surprise registered on her face. "Dr. Harrington?" "May I come in?" the mathematician asked, her usual commanding tone replaced by something softer. Inside, she declined to sit, noticing how Jamal remained standing as well. For the first time, she truly saw the pain in his posture, pain she had dismissed as exaggeration. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began. And research. I've read every page of Jamal's notebooks. I've consulted with specialists about nerve damage like his. I've even spoken to former students at Winston High. Marlene watched her cautiously. And I was wrong, Dr. Harrington said simply. Not just about Jamal's abilities, but about my own biases that prevented me from recognizing them. She turned to Jamal. Your approach to the convergence problem was not only correct but innovative. It would never have occurred to me to combine those methods. That's not something that can be faked or memorized, it's genuine mathematical insight. Jamal nodded, accepting her words but remaining guarded. But that's not why I'm here, Dr. Harrington continued. I'm here because I owe you both more than an apology. I owe you action. She placed a folder on the table. This contains 3 things. First, a formal offer of a full scholarship to Elite University's special admission program, starting immediately if you wish. Second, an appointment with Dr. Lin, the leading neurologist at University Hospital. She specializes in treating nerve damage like yours. All expenses will be covered by a medical fund I've established. Marlene gasped softly. Why would you do this? Because it's right, Dr. Harrington replied. And because mathematics needs minds like Jamal's, unhindered by physical pain or institutional barriers. And the third thing? Jamal asked. A job offer, Dr. Harrington said, turning to Marlene. Not as my housekeeper, but as the mathematics department's new administrative coordinator. Full benefits, including health insurance. The position reports to Professor Carter, not to me. Marlene stared at her in disbelief. I don't have qualifications for that kind of position. You raised a mathematical prodigy while working multiple jobs and fighting a system designed to ignore you both, Dr. Harrington countered. I'd say your organizational skills and persistence are more than qualified. For the first time, Jamal smiled. She's got you there, Mom. Dr. Harrington wasn't finished. There's something else you should know. Dean Richards has filed a formal complaint against Ms. Peterson with the State Board of Education. With the evidence we've gathered, she'll never teach again. Will it make a difference? Marlene asked. For other students, I mean. It's a start, Dr. Harrington admitted. The larger changes, addressing the biases in our educational system, creating truly equal opportunities, those will take longer. But they have to begin somewhere. As she prepared to leave, Dr. Harrington turned to Jamal one more time. I have a research project on nonlinear systems that could benefit from your perspective. If you're interested, that is. I'd like that, Jamal replied. After she left, Marlene and Jamal stood in silence, the folder on their table representing a future neither had dared imagine. Do you trust her? Marlene finally asked. Jamal considered the question. I trust that she's changing. And right now, that's enough. 6 months later, Jamal stood at a podium in Elite University's Grand Lecture Hall, his back straighter than it had been in years. Dr. Lin's treatment protocol had reduced his pain significantly, allowing him to sit for longer periods, though he still preferred standing while working on mathematics. The audience before him included students, faculty, and distinguished visitors attending the university's annual mathematics symposium. In the front row sat Marlene, elegantly dressed in her role as departmental coordinator, a position she had transformed with her organizational skills and straightforward approach. Beside her sat Dr. Harrington, whose initial reluctant respect had evolved into genuine mentorship. The past months had challenged her assumptions and expanded her understanding of both mathematics and humanity. Today, I'm presenting a new approach to chaotic systems using modified topological frameworks, Jamal began, his confidence evident in his voice and posture. As he advanced through his presentation, displaying equations that merged classical techniques with innovative perspectives, the audience's initial polite interest transformed into genuine engagement. Professor Carter, seated in the second row, nodded approvingly at particularly elegant derivations. The young man's mathematical intuition had flourished with proper support and mentorship, confirming what he had always suspected, that brilliance, once freed from constraint, could soar. Dr. Harrington watched her former housekeeper's son command the room with his intellect, remembering her initial dismissal of his abilities. The memory still brought shame, but also determination to continue the work of recognizing talent wherever it appeared. When Jamal concluded, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. During the questions that followed, he handled even the most challenging inquiries with thoughtful precision. Afterward, as people gathered in small groups discussing the presentation, Dean Richards approached Marlene. "Your son has made quite an impression. We've already received inquiries from graduate programs interested in his future work." Marlene smiled. "He's where he belongs now." Across the room, Jamal was deep in conversation with Dr. Harrington about a potential collaborative paper. "Your insight into the boundary conditions completely reframes the problem," she was saying, professional respect evident in her tone. Jamal nodded. "It connects to something I was working on last year, one of those projects I did standing at our kitchen counter." Dr. Harrington's expression softened. "I still can't believe what you accomplished despite every obstacle placed in your way." "Sometimes," Jamal replied, "the biggest obstacle is what others believe is possible for people like me." As the symposium concluded, Marlene watched her son, standing tall, engaged, and respected, and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From cleaning other people's homes to walking these hallowed halls as equals, from pain and injustice to healing and opportunity. There was still work to be done. For every Jamal whose talent was eventually recognized, countless others remained overlooked. But today, watching her son shine in a space that had once seemed impossibly out of reach, Marlene allowed herself to celebrate this victory. And in that moment, surrounded by the very people who had once dismissed them, mother and son exchanged a glance that said what words could not, that sometimes, against all odds, justice could prevail, talent could be recognized, and doors once firmly closed could finally swing open. Dear friend, every child deserves the chance to shine, regardless of their background, race, or economic circumstances. This story reminds us that brilliance can emerge from anywhere, but only if we're willing to look beyond our biases and preconceptions to recognize it. When we fail to protect and nurture young minds, we don't just harm individuals, we rob our entire society of their potential contributions. Let this be a call to create educational environments where all students are respected, protected, and given the opportunity to flourish. If this story touched your heart or opened your mind, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge us to build a more just and compassionate world. Together, we can make a difference.